Hey everyone, how are you all doing? I hope you're all ready and raring to go. So today is kind of like a little bit different to past streams. So today and tomorrow today and tomorrow. Oh my God, today and next week we're going to be looking over some um of the sections of the website and the documentation there, and focusing this week on Codex, and next week, fingers crossed, will be on novel plotting. Um, and I'm kind of do a live demonstration so that we can kind of walk through the cookbook recipes, and if there are any questions anyone has, I can answer them live and that kind of stuff. We've had some new recipes added today, so that's why we're going out for it. Hello, Jean-Luc. How are you doing? Because everything is like written on the website, there isn't actually a Notion doc for today. So don't worry if you've not seen it. Like there isn't one, but everything I say will already be on the website. So you've got that sorted. Hello, Nikki. Hello, Corey. Hi, Jen. Um, yeah. So a lot of this kind of got. You have your apron on, ready to go. That is very good. So a lot of this is based on the fact that we can do an awful lot with the codex that isn't just plugging in our characters. As we saw last week when we were looking at our kind of codex library, we saw that we could use prompt templates, essentially use a codex recipe as a template to save us slight effort when we go into prompting and kind of have like a bank of prompts. But there are a lot of other things that we can do, and I'm just going to go through them. If anyone has any requests, as you see them in the codex, let me know as well. Oh, don't worry, you've not missed long. Like we've not done anything of importance yet. H13. So where do we find the recipes and kind of other learning resources in Novelcrafter? So we have to go to the Novelcrafter website, so not app.novelcrafter.com, but just novelcrafter.com, like the main actual website. If you're on laptop, like desktop view, you will have like your headings and everything there. But I'm going to go on the menu. If we go into resources, then we have our lessons and courses. We also have the monthly news here and the latest blog posts. So we do one of these roughly once a month. Basically, every time we do a monthly muse, I will also write some kind of blog post that's kind of like in line with it, related, that kind of thing. And then we also have our learning and courses, all completely free, whether you use Novelcrafter or not. They're not all AI exclusive. That we're trying to like cover everything, so that's gonna be good. Yeah, it's also sunny in England, which is absolutely disarming. I went outside and like put the laundry on, and it didn't take all day to dry. Weird. So yes, we have a few different sections to this. We have our like novel crafter exclusive-ish section where it's more like AI writing, the codex recipes, novel crafter specific tips. Then we have a storytelling section with a new course coming soon, where you discuss techniques, like writing techniques, that kind of thing. So more the fundamentals of writing to help you kind of give you that background knowledge to understand when AI is giving you like a bad response or not, that kind of thing. And then we have the genre spotlight. So this was written last December. Book came out when we did the website refresh. This is like your kind of like not quite like cozy small town, but like the proper Hallmark style, like very formulaic esque like genre of romance. And we'll keep populating these with more courses as we go on. And yeah, but today we're going to be looking at the Codex. So now some of these Codex recipes were on the website before. There were four. using the Codex to track words, voice sheets, character arcs, and using the Codex for custom instructions. Now, this last one was what we did last week. So I'm going to look at some of the others. I will give you all the linky. Hi, Michael. How are you doing? It's lovely to have you at the streams again. And Emery, too, of course. So here is the cookbook courses for those of you who want to follow along. But I'm going to keep it open at the same time so you can kind of read along. If anyone has any requests, of course, again, let me know. But these are set into 3 sections. So the first is the rapid fire recipes, which are non-AI exclusive, i.e., whether you use AI or not, you will find benefit from these. So like voice sheets, dual character nature, that kind of thing. Then there's the sorting, shaping, and structuring section, and this is looking at kind of uses of the Codex within your uses of Codex within your workflow, and kind of like tips and tricks with that, but not the internals of an entry. And then finally, we have an AI and prompting section, which is more how to use the Codex in tandem with AI to get your desired output. So yeah, I think perhaps what we'll do is we'll do the AI and prompting first, the 3 entries there. I will go fairly briefly over the effective genre and Codex style guides because we have covered this in other lessons. And then keeping track of past books in a series. We can then move on to the sorting, shaping, and structuring section. And then finally, the dual nature characters, if we have time. This last one is like the longest class, and it is quite nuanced depending on what you're wanting to achieve with it. But I think it's all worth kind of giving a look and seeing what you can apply to your workflow, you know? So yes, I guess let's get to it. So making an effective genre Codex entry. Timestamp 1. So yes, genre Codex entries. So because the genre of a story kind of defines the expectations and boundaries and your promise to the reader, you want to make sure that you're keeping it throughout your entire work. And that's hard enough as a human writer, but when you're writing with AI, using a genre codex entry can really help kind of create a consortium of what makes your story tick and what your readers expect of you so that the AI will help fulfill that. Everyone, no matter whether you're using AI or not, will benefit from a genre codex entry. However, it will have a greater impact on your output prose when writing with AI. I feel like when we were talking internally, we felt that the genre is one of the first elements that you decide on when a story idea sparks. Like, you might be like, some kids get trapped down a mine, but you'll already have an idea of like, is this horror that we're doing, adventure, fantasy? You'll kind of have that with that initial spark. So at the early stages when you're brainstorming, even just having a few words and kind of sketching out like a general idea helps kind of guide. It's like a compass for all the brainstorming, especially if you have it as by default a codex entry is set for the entire like context. It will show up in every prompt. So now, how can you make a genre codex entry? This is really simple. You make a new codex entry by pressing new entry. And then you go down to quick create and you have global entries, style guides, and story genres. We click on the story genre and you can see it comes up. If we go into tracking in the AI context menu, you have always include this entry in the AI context. And then you'll put in your story genre. So in my book, Only Dogs Left, that I do on stream, you can see here that it's a really simple kind of premise, but it filled everything that I felt was needed. However, it might be, say we take our novel from last week. Um, do I already have a genre codex entry? That's actually what I should check. That is not the. That's another experiment, so I'll get rid of that. So please be specific and give core genre elements and so I'm just going to ask from the brainstorming that we did. Okay, so yeah. So this is a climate fiction comedy. So I'll make my new entry. Story genre. A cli-fi comedy. I love that. That is delightful. Story genre. Boop. And then we might add, so I'm going to have a look. So what other information do we want to include? So I feel like the core genre elements, they are interesting. And I think if I had more time, I would go through and like add little bits in. But I think the genre expectations is more what we need for this entry. So I'm just gonna I'm not gonna keep all of these. I'm just putting them in because I can't pin because of the interface size. So I'm gonna get rid of those three. I just feel like they're not necessary for what we need. We could also do another codex entry for secondary genre elements, but we're going to try and see how using the story genre can help with our story if we're just doing like a super duper basic kind of beat. So who is my cast of characters? So I'm going to say Coral and Read Debate. I will set a custom view of Coral. And we can see in the general purpose prompt, if I preview the final prompt, we can see that we've got Coral, we have Read, and we also have our genre. So that's all good. So I'm going to generate this beat. I'll go for Sonnet 3/7, and we'll just see what it comes out. So it's very on the nose, but it is starting to give. It's keeping everything at the within the parameters that we're wanting. If you want to look through the book, through the course, we also have like a case study there based on the Cozy Mystery series we did last April. So again, it's a a small village cozy mystery in the British countryside with an animal companion. And then in this genre, the mystery is solved through wit, social connection, observation, minimal danger, an emphasis on puzzle solving over action, and a light comedic tone. Now, of course, you may find that during your process the genre changes, and that's totally fine. all you do is change the genre in your codex entry. You want to make sure that you keep on top of that, because otherwise you'll end up with like the AI thinking it's one thing and you thinking it's another, and then you'll end up with clashes and everything goes all like confusing. So yeah, keep your codex genre entry up to date. And then finally, in these cookbooks, we also have a kind of mini troubleshooting section. So some common, not issues, but common things that come up when helping people through their genre codex entries are if people are too vague, but also on the contrary, if they're too specific. So if they're too vague, it might be that the AI doesn't have enough direction. So my favorite example is Harry Potter versus Percy Jackson. Both are fantasy, urban, and set in a, like set with like some kind of educational thing, either the camp or the Hogwarts. But they're very different types of story. And it's kind of like keeping that in mind as you're writing. So here we've got another example of a fantasy genre. But we also have, if your genre entry is overly restrictive, like you start going into outline territory, then you end up with every problem getting solved the way that the conclusion is solved, and things just kind of getting a bit stilted and rushed. And that's not what we want. We want kind of the entire story. You might also be tempted to have a genre entry, especially if you're doing a very niche genre, as kind of very the AI it's very much a not list. Like, you know, we don't want love triangles, we don't want chosen one, we don't want um elves or whatever creature, like if you're trying to do a fantasy that's different, that kind of thing. And then because of that, the AI knows it doesn't do that, but you've left it too open, and so then the AI starts filling in the gaps. And really, what you want to do is be like, here are the gaps you can go in, ignore everything else. You will be spending far too long just typing every single situation where you don't want the AI to be there otherwise. You know what I mean? I'm going to take a quick drink and then we will move on to the next cookbook class. I realized that this rapid fire ended up being 15 minutes, so maybe it wasn't rapid fire. Oops. But I hope there was something you could all take away from that. Yeah, so H13 says they write it to avoid their genre conventions. Yeah, because I think because when you put a genre entry, it can automatically jump to stereotypes. So you need to kind of guide it to what you're wanting for the genre rather than what the AI thinks the genre should have. We don't all want to be writing Lord of the Rings every single time we write, after all. Okay, so we'll take a little look at effective style guides. So genre entries, they tell us the kind of story that you're writing, i.e. a fantasy, romance, kind of setting the tone, whereas the style guide tells us, and by extension AI, how to wield it, to write it. Um, a lot of people will also do this within their prompting itself, but a style guide works just as well, and it helps you maintain consistency, so you know, I don't say in these recipes, the style guide would have the codex always has a capital C. Um, but when you're writing prose, it will be, you'll have different rules, and it helps as a reference when editing and beforehand to kind of keep a consistent voice. So when we were looking at this, we were kind of thinking, so when do you need a style guide? And a style guide is great when you first start a new project. Like, get your genre, your style guide, your novel point of view, and the language, as they will all impact on the style. Um, if you're working with AI on prose generation for the first time, especially if you already have words before and you're wanting it to mimic your style. If you're collaborating with co-authors, regardless of whether or not you're using AI, you probably want to have a style guide agreed between you. And for when you want to maintain consistent voice across multiple writing sessions, if, say, you only write, or you only have the time to write once a week or once a month, and or you are looking, or you're a prolific author and write between multiple genres and pen names, it might be that each pen name has its own style guide, and so having the style guide means you can keep referring back to it. Um, yeah, I've accidentally covered all of those then. Likewise, you don't need to benefit from AI or be using AI to benefit from a style guide. Now, to make a Codex style guide almost identical to a genre entry, you click New Entry and then go Style Guide. This is 90% laid out just as the genre. Like, you've got your always including the AI context, which used to be known as a global entry. And you can add in your description, and it's pre-populated the title. In here, you might include things like narrative voice, description styles, how you handle dialogue. If you write in a non-English language, if you don't write in English, it might be that the AI gets things wrong sometimes, especially like which punctuation should be used. So you could include guidance there. Specific do's and don'ts or other technical requirements at the reading age you could include in here. My prose style reference is pretty short actually for Only Dogs Left, because I use the prior words as a kind of mini codex guide kind of thing, as we've seen in previous classes. So I kind of kept this more as a prose style guide for her attitude and inner voice, and the pacing. But you could very easily go into more detail, have a more structured output. You could use codex details for this, but I don't feel like it's needed. And then you end up with loads of details that you only use for one codex entry. In the case study, we have two different style guides. One is a young adult style guide, kind of first person, internal thoughts, very teen appropriate, kind of quick paced, action orientated, whereas a literary style fiction or literary fiction style is a lot more reflective, has more of a narrative, third person, past tense, more descriptive. And I mean, I'm not gonna ask you to guess which prose came from which style guide, but from the same prompt, I'm sure you can see how the style guide has instantly made the same moment very different. And then some things to kind of keep a eye on for when doing a style guide. You want to keep it relatively straightforward, and not overcomplicate it, because sometimes if you add too many instructions, the AI kind of like, I'm sure you've seen this if you've added like dozens of codex entries by mistake, and the AI kind of gets overwhelmed and doesn't know which information is essential for it to remember. So you want to kind of keep things a little bit more succinct, make sure that everything you're asking is what you want. But you also want to be flexible. So don't start asking things like, have each sentence under 15 words, because you might end up then with very monotonous text that kind of is very succinct, is very like everything is under 15 words, but they're all 14-word sentences. Um, and so by kind of giving general guidance on a principle, it helps keep things going. I lost track of my sentence then. Okay. Have another little drinky. So the next Codex recipe we're looking at is keeping track of past books in a series. I get asked this a lot. So, like, kind of, where do I store the information about the last book I wrote? Especially if you're writing like a long series, it might be that many events have happened that you want to refer to, but you don't necessarily want the entire book kind of included in your context every time you send a message. Kind of as we were talking about in the style guide, we don't want to overwhelm the AI. And even if you're writing without AI, it might be that you don't want to have to keep going back to that book looking for some obscure fact, coming back in. You want to kind of have like a mini repository of everything related to the past books to help you. And this is where codex entries really help. I will answer questions at the end of each lesson. So don't worry, I've seen it. So we. So when reading, we've probably, I think we've all seen that occasionally a character description or a trait might shift slightly, or a favorite color between novels, or it might be that a pivotal moment has kind of been misremembered, and this contradiction can really pull readers out of the story. By having a well-maintained codex across your series, so you can have your book and series codex entries, these are really valuable. It helps with the consistency, but of course you don't see the past books there. So we want to have that dedicated section. We've put here for when should you use it. Essentially, if you're working on the second or later book in a series, that is the summation of those 3 bullet points. So we're now going to create a codex entry for this hypothetical Sea of Silence if we were writing a sequel called The Desert of Deathness. I don't know. We might then want a codex entry for Sea of Silence. So we go to New Entry, Other. You could also potentially put this in lore, I guess, because it's like the lore of the world. But it's kind of personal preference. So I'm going to call this Sea of Silence, and then in brackets, book 1. And the reason that I've put so much there, like the book 1 bit, is so that it doesn't necessarily get mentioned, because it could be that the term Sea of Silence gets mentioned in your book and it's not referring to the book. And now we want to create either codex details or a description for what happened, the key points. So I kind of generally advise major plot points that have direct relevance on the book you're writing, key character development, world building revelations, unsolved plot or unresolved plot threads that are going to come up in this book, and key relationships. I think every time you try to add something in, you want to be like, is this relevant to the book I'm working on at the moment? You can always change and add new things, but if it's not relevant, then you're just wasting tokens and adding more work for yourself. So I'm going to say that you might be like, okay, well, in book 1, we're going to go bullet point. I might be like, changes. Of beliefs. The cult. I can't remember what they're called. I don't think I even had a. Was the cult's plans were stopped, but the city is recovering. Technology is not back to where it was, and the cities are now floating in a new current system. So we're saying this kind of like as a, you know, there are these like uncontrolled elements, not members. So this is not character changes now. This is key story changes or key story points. You know, you can just think of what you want for these. So members of the cult have gone to ground. Not all were caught. If we had a side plot, Dune and River are awash on a small outpost trying to get back to the main island to warn them of what? I don't know. Of whatever happens in this story. So you can kind of include these bits, and then you may want to be like, okay, in tracking, we're going to always include this in the AI context, and it might be for the first like 5 or 6 chapters you have this there, and then as everything kind of gets settled down, you change it to include when detected. You can also add these as chapter context, so or scene context. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of use these past books to help. It might be if there was like any major relationship changes, you include that there. And yeah, you just kind of go a little bit wild. Likewise, once again, I have the case study using Only Dogs Left, kind of looking at plot points, character development, relationship development, unresolved threads, and you can keep adding to these or removing from them as you go along. So, pitfalls or troubleshooting. I think the first thing that comes to mind with this is being like, oh my god, what do I include in here? Like, you could see even I was having this with, because it was a made up story that we didn't actually brainstorm, I was having a lot of difficulty thinking of what to put in, and I think that issue still happens even if you've written the entire book. So take it slow. Start with the crucial elements that are important for those first few chapters, and if it gets to a point where you're like, oh, this bit's missing, you can just add it in. Like, it's a living document, you can keep going. And you can also remove things. Don't be afraid to remove stuff that is no longer relevant, especially if it has changed. Like, if, say, you're like, okay, well, this person's missing, but after chapter 17 they're found, you can get rid of that fact. Or you could put it in a detail of, like, obsolete facts. You know, that kind of thing. Again, if you discover continuity errors, you can still just use text rewrite or text replacement prompts to edit your scene, add the details into your codex, and kind of keep going. If you find that the AI doesn't know, in quotation marks, know which part to use, or it's kind of like struggling to use the information where you need it, consider trimming down the entry. It may be that it's too big. Like, if you've ended up doing like more a long 3-page summary of the book rather than key facts, that might bog it down. You can also check the prompt preview frequently and be like, okay, I know that this is in there that's causing this to happen, like that kind of causal effect analysis. And again, Codex entries, all of them, you can remove stuff as well as adding them, and just stick it in the notes. So, if we go into research notes, AI doesn't see this. You can just put them all there and kind of leave it. And then finally, the AI might make assumptions if it doesn't have enough information. So you just want to make sure that you're giving everything that it needs. It might be that if something is like really essential to the story, like they're talking about a specific memory, that you want to mention that event in the specific beat, just kind of very much honing in on it and being like, okay, well, I don't want to regenerate this until the information comes through, so I'm just gonna put the stuff I need in and really direct the AI for this moment. Okay, so we had a couple of questions. Okay, so how do we add in the add detail? How does the add details function? How does the when AI uses Codex, does it also read everything in the add? Okay. So I believe Gridfree's first question is kind of like a general how do Codex details work? And so you can go add details and then say we've got a category, but you can add in your own custom details for different aspects. We've got some presets and some kind of the normal types. Codex details, unless you go to AI and change whether or not they're shown, they're always added just the same as description. They are sent to the AI. It's just more a title and subtitle. So if we go generate prose, preview final prompt, you can see that do we have any? No, we don't have any Codex details in this story. Let me go to Wolf in Red. Say if we had a scene general purpose, and we go down to red, you can see that we have the description here, but then we also have her internal conflicts, her motivations, her personality, etc. And these are all included. So we have the description, and then we have all of these different details. So I like to use details when I guess when it's something other than description. So like physical description and like basics I'll put in, but if it's something that I feel is really important for the story, and a lot of characters or Codex entries will share that trait, then I'll put it in. Like motivations, I always feel like everyone needs a motivation for the story, so that will always be a detail. I also have like the affiliation and species because those are important in my story. But if you're writing a detective fiction, you don't need to specify that everyone's a human, unless you've got non-human characters. It's implied. You might find that you really want to add pronouns for everything because you want to kind of make it very explicit, especially if you're using gender-neutral names, that kind of thing. I think that answers that question. Just so I don't forget, relations. Does the AI use keywords to build story, or do you need to add a relation? So the AI takes in mentions. So I mentioned red, so maybe red, bail, recruitment, and then those Codex entries are brought into the context. But if I did the Wild Wind pack, You can see now this is bringing in all of the kind of connections, the relations. So all of the, so you have like a parent and child relationship. So if I go for the Wild Wind pack, you can see here the relationships, all of the child references. You can also do this with world building and the like. We'll go a bit more into this after. But there is a Codex recipe on that. Internal. Yeah, the AI can see the name of the details. You saw in the prompt what the AI could see, and there's like little Pac-Man brackets. So yeah, it can see them. Okay, so we've done the AI and prompting. Okay, so Neural Splice says, perhaps explain how details differ from Codex editions. So Codex editions are like a progression, like you can have additions or replacements. They are when things change for a character throughout or a location or whatever. Like it might be, okay, well, if they suddenly dye their hair, you want to mention that kind of thing. And these apply to any detail that's text relate a text field. Details are more the kind of the individual nuances. So say if you were doing, I don't know, like a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, it might be then that you have um, character sheets. You might have like, you know, the different stats, the spells, that kind of thing, all in different details. But as a character levels up, you might be then like, okay, well, I'm going to update all the details with a progression, that kind of thing. What if one of your characters is telling the story? I I mean, like, if it's the point of view character, then that's included in the AI because it's the point of view character. I don't know. I don't know if that's what you're meaning there, H13. Michael says you can use a general motivation for the overall story, then you can dial it in by adding more character motivations in the scene beats or throughout the scene beat codex for that scene. Yeah, absolutely. And you can also, if a motivation changes, you could do a replacement progression and be like, you know, this is their new goal, that kind of thing. Using codex relations for complex world building would be what you wanted to look at for that kind, the question we were looking at earlier. And this is kind of for like organizing everything in hierarchies. So if you are doing like a magic system or world building, or you're even just got a cast of characters and you don't want to have to mention them all for a chat, this is when you would use this. So like I had in here characters with a Z, and that's because I have all of the characters mentioned here, and I didn't want every time I typed in characters with an S to bring up this codex entry unless I specifically wanted it to. So that's how this works. You can add your entry and just like type it in. You can invert the relationship. So say if you accidentally made a character with a child of characters, it won't be pulled in. It's a one-way relationship, so you'd have to switch it around. And likewise, you can remove the reference. So here, so this is a character version. We also have like the city. So within Nova Bezos, the codex entry, I have relations, and these child relations are for the different districts. Some of these then have their own child relations of buildings, and it might be that if you have too many of these, it's like a, you know, like a family tree, how it gets bigger and bigger, and then you type in Nova Bezos and you accidentally pull in like 50 codex entries when you don't need that many. So you want to, one of the troubleshooting tips is to make sure that the links are necessary for your story, because this is purely a kind of like not quite behind the scenes, but this feature is a, when you mention entry A, entries BCE are all also pulled up, you know? So yeah, you can see here in Only Dogs Left, I also have the characters with the Z there. I've got some examples here of if you had like a fantasy political structure, and houses Bob, Greg, and Edna are all there. Or you have a sci-fi corporation, you would want um, to have the child entries, but it may be that you only need that for like your initial brainstorming while they're short. Magic system, like that would be a really good, I think, time to use relations when you have like a magic system, especially if you've got lots of like interconnected principles and you don't want to have to keep mentioning them every single time. Yeah, so grid, your main thing, context overload. If you create lots and lots of relations, you will end up with um, a big mess and lots of codex entries getting pulled through, basically. Um, you may find that the codex entry you expect is not appearing, so check the prompt preview. We looked at that earlier in the class, and you can kind of go back and forth and make sure that all your relations are the correct way around. And you may find that just automatically adding everything in is meaning that the information's there, but it's not getting used in the way you want it to. And kind of the solution to that is, whilst you use relations for consistent background context, if there's something you specifically want to happen, like a trigger, then mention it in your beat. That's the kind of the one way to be sure it's going to be included. Okay, so our other organizational tip is adding codex entries as scene context. Oh, my voice is getting a bit cracky. Hopefully it's still clear enough. Do you ever find when writing that you have loads of codex entries that are relevant to your scene? Either like it's a family dinner, you are doing your world building, and you've got like lots of locations mentioned, etc., etc., but they don't necessarily all tie in neatly to the beat, or they need to be mentioned for every single beat. And if you have 10 beats, you might be like, oh, I don't really want to have to mention all 15 characters every single time. I get you. Scene context basically allows you to bring the codex entries directly into the scene beat completion prompts as in the context. So you want to go to this plus codex button. You can have it in the plan interface, or if you go into the write interface, you can also add to the codex. And then you can like search and add your character. So for example, when working on the first scene in Only Dogs Left, I was like, I don't want to, it's like a big party for the entire underworld, and I was like, oh, like not underworld, oh my god, for the entire apartment block, and I didn't want to have to mention all of the families that live in the apartment block. So I just type in apartment block, and using the relations, that pulls everyone in, but also I don't have to type in apartment block in each beat. Again, check the prompt preview to see where the added codex entries appear. You won't get times like if you add it there and also mention the entry, you don't get like duplicates or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. But you just want to make sure it actually is there. If you write non-fiction, you will find it really useful to add in any specialized knowledge. So if you have any legal procedures, scientific concepts, anything you want to make sure that the AI is drawing from that rather than its memory banks, this is where you would include it. You can kind of keep everything there, and you know that all that background context is being given to the AI. Or you can make everything global. It depends on how you're working. If you're doing different topics per chapter, it may be that you want to do codex references in a scene, but if you're doing like an entire book on one topic that uses the same references frequently, you may want to make them visible for everything. Um, so again, there are some troubleshooting aspects with this. If like with the relations, if you attach too many entries, the AI will have too much information, some of which isn't relevant. Or you might find that key information is buried in lengthy codex entries. And so when you're adding loads of them, again, it's filling up the whole thing. Um, and yeah, again, like with the relations, you want to be careful that you're not relying on implicit context from codex entries. If you're finding that the AI is struggling with writing, then you want to make sure you're being explicit in your directions. Okay, so there is one more, the dual characters lesson, but I feel like I can answer questions on that later if anyone needs or like has any. Um, I am going to answer some questions if people have them, and then afterwards I will head off um, to spare my because I don't think there'll be time to cover that. So yeah, ask your questions away, and we'll have a quick Q&A. It doesn't have to be about the codex, but if you have any questions about what I've covered so far today, then that's always good as well. And let me know if there are any codex recipes that you feel weren't here and you feel we should add in, because we're always looking to update the recipe books. So Grid says, do scenes have the codex entry just for that scene, or is it just for the chapter? Just for the scene. So if we had two scenes, you would have to add your characters in separately. So they'd be in the context in scene 1, but they wouldn't be in the context for scene 2. This is because sometimes it may be that if you're writing a chapter with multiple scenes, that either you have a different perspective partway through, or it's changed location, time, the characters around, and so you want to be able to switch those around. So yeah, does anyone else have any questions? I'll give you all a minute. Boop. Okay, if I do a style guide of my way of writing and then prompt to mimic my... So are you... I'm assuming, Robert, that you're asking, like, if I do a style guide of your way of writing, but also provide your thing. You could do that. Depending on the model, and your way of writing, like it could be enough to do, but either. Like I've never done both together, but I've done them both individually, and they seem to work. So like if you're doing, like Sonnet 3.7, that's very good at mimicking, and it can also follow a style guide. So you probably don't need both, but you can. It's worth seeing if there's like specific things it's still not getting. You could then use your style guide. Jean-Luc, where is your cake? It's in the oven. God, it needs time to bake. Um, Thanks so much. Okay, I did some tweaking of my codexes per your tips. Oh, well, I'm glad it's helped. Oh yeah, you forgot to write mimic my writing style with a prompt. Yeah. I meant Meta, the character wrote the book in real life. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, you could just do have your character, like if you're doing non-fiction, like when I write non-fiction, I will have a character of myself in the codex and then have it written from first person perspective as me. So yeah, you could do that, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I think unless you have like you're only writing in one genre or one type, yeah, having the basic prompt, you don't need 50,000 prompts. The Codex, as we saw last week, is incredible for kind of like cutting down on the need for lots of specific prompts. Um, yeah, brilliant. I don't think we had actually that much lag, so we should all be good for that. So I will see you. So I'm not here on Wednesday. This week, so I will probably do the stream on either Tuesday or Thursday. I won't commit just yet. It might be Thursday. And then we can go from there. We'll be doing some more of the Wolf in Red. And of course, I'll be answering any questions that you have. And then next week, I might not be on the stream on my own. I might have a guest star. So keep your eyes peeled. Um, oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad it's been helpful. Um, And yeah, as Michael says, what works for one model may not work for another, or it might be overkill. You've just got to, yeah, trial and error. If it's not right, don't be afraid to send the message again with some small tweaks and build up your own prompt library and like what prompts work for you. So yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy the sun, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.